So look at that for consistency. That's a cracking consistency, is that, for a creme brulee? The richest, creamiest creme brulee you've ever eaten. A video on creme brulees. So, let's set up the story. I worked with a chef and he showed me how to make creme brulees. I need to move this, there's a pan sticking in my mouth. He showed me how to make creme brulees in a different way than I'd been taught before. And what he did was he cooked them out in a pan. So he boiled the cream, added the yolks, boiled the cream, added the sugar, added the yolks, cooked it out like a custard in the pan, and then poured it into the moulds. So he didn't cook them in the oven in a bain-marie of water. And they were the best creme brulees ever, and it's how I've made them ever since, and I've always used his recipe. He then went to work somewhere else for like one of the best chefs in the world 25 years ago. He probably still is one of the best chefs in the world, but doesn't cook as much anymore. And we were talking about the creme brulees, and he said that he'd gone to work for this chef, and this chef's creme brulees were even better. And they were just creamier. And I'm sure he knew why they were creamier and how they were creamier, just didn't want to tell me. Which is understandable. You've got to keep some secrets to yourselves. And I was kind of thinking, I wonder how they are creamier. So this has been at the back of my mind for 25 years, something like that. 25 years. How would they be creamier? What could he possibly have done to make them creamier and better than the creme brulees that this person showed me how to make in the first place? So if we take into context how good the creme brulees are that I was taught to make, every person that's tasted these creme brulees that I make, which is someone else's recipe, it's not mine, they have said that they're the best creme brulees they've ever tasted. And then some people even add, whenever they go into a restaurant, wherever it is, either in the UK or in France or wherever, they order a creme brulee to compare it to the ones that I made them, and they always say it's the ones that I make are always better than the ones they taste anywhere else. And a couple of people in particular, and one person says his wife always orders creme brulee, always. If it's on the menu, she orders it, and still he looks at her when she takes the first bite, and she looks at him and says, "It's nice, but it's not as nice as thingies." I'm not going to use my name. So, and then for my friend, the chef, to say that the ones that he tasted at this one of the best chefs in the world to be even better than that, I found kind of a little bit mind-boggling. But it's been at the back of my mind for 20 years, and you're always learning. You're always getting better. Hopefully. If you're curious, you're wanting to improve, there's always a better way, an easier way to do something. There's something that doesn't take as much work, or a cheaper way to do something. So I was faffing around with lemon possets a couple of years ago now, because I've just rewatched the video. And in one of the lemon posset videos, what I did was instead of just boiling up the cream, I reduced the cream to thicken it, so it was more like a clotted cream. Simmered it and reduced it to evaporate off some of the excess liquid in the double cream, so the fat was concentrated. And then it dawned on me that that's probably what they were doing with the creme brulees to make them even better than the ones that I normally make. So we're going to do that. I've got some, and also I need some egg whites, so we might as well use the egg yolks to make some creme brulees. Someone once said that the creme brulees that I made weren't proper creme brulees, so I haven't looked up the definition of creme brulee, but people say things to you, and sometimes it's just out of them being mean You know, and that's not a proper creme brulee. That's not a proper cheesecake. That's not a proper. Those aren't julienne of carrots. That kind of rubbish that people say. So, you know, I don't often take that much notice of what people kind of say in their definitions of what actually something is. So, I've done some calculations. I've done some workings out about the right kind of ratio for reducing the cream. We've got 600 millilitres. We're going to reduce that. We're going to bring it up to the boil. We're going to reduce it down to 450 millilitres ish. And then I reckon for the creme brulee recipe that I make, it is 85 millilitres of cream. It's to 1 egg yolk and 9 grams worth of sugar, and then a little bit of vanilla. Normally I put a vanilla pod in, but I'm not going to use all that. I've got some vanilla paste that I made years ago that's in the fridge that's still fine, so we're going to use some of that rather than break into a vanilla pod. But I reckon if you've been really fancy, I reckon six egg yolks for 1 vanilla pod, and then you get a really kind of quite rich creme brulee. I think that's about right. Obviously the more vanilla you put in, well, there is a threshold, so a good amount of vanilla. I reckon 1 vanilla pod per 6 yolks. Probably actually. No, it'll be about right. No, because I'm always, for the functions that I do, we're always on a budget. It always has to be as cheap as possible, and it's quite annoying at times, because if people were prepared to pay a little bit more, the food could get exponentially better. But vanilla pods are expensive, so I would, from a catering point of view, for 16 creme brulees, I'd use 1 vanilla pod. You get enough of vanilla flavour, and also you've got to rein the money in somewhere. You know, like, you can't expect a world class creme brulee for £2.50. You know what I mean? You know, like a two or three Michelin star quality creme brulee for £2.50. So, but I reckon, but certainly if you went into a really good restaurant, they would use 1 vanilla pod for probably about per every 6 yolks, something like that. But anyway, so we'll reduce some cream, and then I'll kind of show you. We'll bring it to the boil, and then I'll kind of show you. It bubbles differently, so it'll bubble away, and the bubbles will be of a certain size, and then the bubbles will change, and we'll be able to visibly see the viscosity of the cream change. So we'll do that, and I might just do a short video as well. Although they're a pain to make, I think they're kind of quite interesting, and it's difficult to make. They're a pain to make them. They're a little bit difficult, but there's a different skill involved, and I think there is something to be said for cutting things down to the bare minimum, rather than having me talk my way through things and explain what I'm doing, like the workings out of it all, and more of an understanding of why we do things and why we don't do things, and what happens if you do this and what happens if you don't do that, and why we're doing certain things, which is interesting within itself if you are interested in that side of cooking, the sciencey side of cooking. But some people just want to know how to do something. They don't want to know why we do it. Just tell me what to do, and that's all I want to do. So I'll see about doing two, a short one and a long faffy one, which I'm doing now, which we're already up at 9 minutes, but hopefully it'll be another couple of minutes and then we'll be all done. Hopefully we'll see if this works. Boil 600 millilitres of double cream. Turn down to a slow simmer and reduce the cream to 450 millilitres or thereabout. Give it a stir now and again to make sure that it's not catching on the bottom of the pan. Add 45 grams of sugar. Make sure that it's completely melted. Add the seeds from the vanilla pod. Separate 5 eggs. Whisk your yolk. Add a little of the cream to the yolks. Add the yolks back to the cream, whisking as you go so we don't split the yolk. Scrape out the bowl. Put the pan back on the heat and gently cook until custard has thickened and the eggs have cooked. Pour through a sieve to make sure there's no cooked bits of egg in there. Give it a gentle tap to make sure all the custard goes through the sieve. We don't want to push it through, we just want it to go through naturally. Scrape off the bottom of the sieve, we don't want to waste any of that delicious custard. Give it a mix, pour it into your mould and chill until set solid. Sprinkle the top with sugar, wipe the edge to get rid of all the excess sugar. Take your fancy blowtorch, caramelize the top. Careful not to burn your fingers though. Move the caramel around just so you get an even coating. Allow it to cool, put more sugar on top of the caramel to get an extra crunchy top. Perfect, that's delicious. Right, so that certainly worked. And it is creamier than the ones I've made in the past. You don't necessarily have to reduce the cream. I mean, it's a bit of a faff, but it's something that I just wanted to have a play around with. If you don't want to have to reduce the cream, just use 450 millilitres of double cream and the 5 eggs and then the 45 grams with the sugar and then the vanilla pod. So you don't have to reduce the cream, but it just makes it just that little bit more special. That's absolutely delicious, is that? That must have what they've been doing at the really fancy restaurant. Or they were using clotted cream instead of double cream. I don't think double cream's a certain fat content, so I can't imagine you could buy you can buy extra thick double cream in the supermarket. So instead of faffing around reducing it, because let's be honest, I like faffing, just buy the extra thick stuff in the supermarket and use that instead. And you'll kind of get the same results as that. You'll get the best creme brulee you've ever eaten. Well, it's not going to be the best in the world. There are some people who have eaten better ones and made better ones. That reminds me of an article I once read. But so cooking it out of the pan is the secret, rather than just making the mixture, pour it into a mold, and then put it into a bath of water, and then cooking it in the oven. It's just not as creamy that way, and I don't understand why, because it's just the same ingredients. But it might be through the evaporation of the concentration of the cream through the boiling process and then the cooking out in the pan. That might be the reason why it's creamier, but it's certainly a lot creamier when you cook it out in the pan. And it's good practice for making custard with egg yolks. Doing it in a pan, because you've got to be really careful. It's a low heat, and you've got to gently cook them, otherwise you end up with scrambled eggs. But it's good practice for making like a creme anglaise. Now, first head chef that I worked for, it was all about making things cheaper with my first head chef. That's a bad thing, but it was to give people a taste of something good, but on a slightly less budget, is quite admirable, if I'm honest. And he would use, instead of egg yolks, he would use whole eggs. So a creme brulee sets in a different way if it's got whole eggs in it, the egg yolk and white. You get a creamier creme brulee if you just use egg yolks, and a yellower creme brulee. But what he would have done was he would have put a bit of cochineal colouring in, just to make it a little bit more yellow. And he wouldn't have used whole cream, he would have used a mixture of cream. He probably would have used 2 parts cream to 1 part whole milk. So it would not be as rich, but it would lower the cost down. So those 2 factors would lower the cost down. But then he would brulee the top, caramelise the top and the sugar. He would use brown sugar because he said that it would last longer in the fridge. So what would he do? He'd make quite a few up. So he worked in big big hotel kitchens. So you kind of couldn't. Lots of things needed to be done beforehand. So using granulated sugar or caster sugar on top of a creme brulee, it's only got a certain amount of time before the caramel starts to melt if under refrigeration, because the fridge is not a particularly dry environment. You know, it's a little bit of a wet environment is a fridge. So the caramel would pick up the liquid in the air and turn soft. So, but by using a brown sugar, the caramel on top would last longer. So the idea would be that any leftover creme brulees from a function could then be, you'd always make extra. So there's accidents in kitchens, so you drop things. So if you've got 100 people sitting down for dinner, you don't cook 100, you cook 110, 120, because a waiter might have an accident, something might happen in the fridges, they might get knocked or fall out, a chef might trip over and fall and break 10 of them, taking them, giving to the waiting staff. So you always make extra. But what my first head chef would do, those extra ones would be in the fridge, and they would get used on the lunchtime menu the next day, or the residence menu in the evening. And by caramelising all the tops of them and using brown sugar, he wouldn't need to then re-caramelise the tops of them. He could just take them straight out of the fridge and serve them for the lunch menu or the evening meal menu, and then you didn't waste anything. So that's kind of why he would use brown sugar instead of granulated sugar. But anyway, that really works just out. That's going to be. I'm not saying I'm going to do that for functions, but it's certainly one of those things that's been playing around in the back of my head for 20 years or so, and finally worked out how to do it. But I probably didn't give it that much. It's not that it took me 20 years to work it out. It's just been at the back of my head for 20 years. And then when you do something and there's that realization, oh, that's how they did it, type of thing. But that's a lovely consistency for a creme brulee. But there we go, a success, and I shall enjoy the rest of that. I'll give the others away. I'm not going to eat them all. So yeah, I've got that little one that just had a little bit in. So that creme brulee had slightly melted because I'd just finished doing the caramel on the top. So if we look at this one, which is straight out of the fridge, we'll see the consistency how it should be. I just need to blow my nose first though. Right, clean spoon. But if we look at that consistency there, that's straight out of the fridge. That's not the kind of consistency you get from a creme brulee that you cook in a bain-marie in the oven. That is more akin to a creme patissier. Anyway, but they're thickened with flour. So look at that for a consistency. That's a cracking consistency, is that, for a creme brulee? Have a go. It's a bit of a faff, but make that for the people in your life and they'll love you even more.